Hello, Rachel. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thanks, Alexis. How are you?
I'm well too.
Good.
This is really lovely to be sharing some of our content today. As I described in the little spiel below, today is a sharing of the frameworks that Dr. Rachel Hannam and I have been using independently for probably a decade each. And it was only at our first retreat together that we realized that we've been using essentially the same framework. So that was really beautiful confirmation. And I think as we continue to work together, we're going to find more and more of this overlap in a really integrated and synthesized way. So I'd love to introduce Dr. Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists and myself, Alexis Dennehy from One Natural Therapies, and our frameworks for working with the mind. Now, I'm keen to see your picture, Rachel, but I wonder if you might just give us an introduction before you actually show us the visual.
Yeah, absolutely. As a therapist and a psychologist, what seems to be a universal challenge or difficulty for all of us, myself included, everybody, is that bringing forth our deepest yearnings, our needs, our values, and therefore, I guess, our true or essential self is easier said than done. We come into this world, all of us, hardwired for and kind of expecting to be loved unconditionally, to be protected, to be supported, to be included, to be encouraged. We're hardwired for love and belonging, as Brené Brown says. And then a whole lot of things happen to all of us along the way on the journey to adulthood. And through our development, we develop a range of coping mechanisms or defense or protection mechanisms to cope with the shock, pain, and difficulty of life in this human form. Life is difficult. It's the first noble truth in Buddhism. There is suffering. And I'm interested as a psychologist on what happens? What's the sequence? What's the process of how human beings adapt to shock and pain, and what suffering is, and how we can work with our suffering. And as you know, I'm very big on self-compassion or self-empathy practices. And I really think self-compassion is the only option in the end, because the alternative is self-judgment and self-punishment and self-criticism, and they never seem to work or do anything good for us. So I'm going to present a model, which I sometimes call the 3-circle model of the self, or a concentric circles model, as you've named it. And it sort of explains to people what happens. And it's also reassuring for some of my clients that they are not their addiction. They are not their aggression. They are not their people-pleasing behaviors or their anger or their, avoidant behaviors. There's so much more to them than that. And there is a pathway back to their needs and back to their true nature. So that's the background. And this is a model that I use, put on my whiteboard quite often, but I don't have a whiteboard here. So I've just drawn it on a piece of paper. Would you like me to share that with you and everyone now? Or do you want to?
Very soon.
Very soon?
Yeah.
Yes.
Only that, I just found it really fascinating. Having studied the sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which are the texts that all yoga practitioners subscribe to, I hadn't personally come across other practitioners or lines of thought that used the phrase essential self or basic nature or true self. I thought it was unique to yoga, and look, it may be that if we traced those lines of thought back, they would branch back to Buddhism. But it was just such an enlightening moment to hear you use the phrase essential nature, and for many people who practice yoga, they'd probably be interested to hear. I know it gave me a focus for at least a year of my practice, just to know that the sole goal of yoga is to stand in who we truly are. That's the sole reason that we practice. And all of the added benefits like good posture and confidence and relaxation and health, they're just a spin-off of standing in who we truly are. So, and I agree. I think anybody working in health goes into it, and probably other professions as well. We go into it to alleviate suffering and to be provided such a simple framework to work with suffering, I think is profound. So, the very, if I may, not because it's better, but because it's simpler, I'd love to just give a little bit about the Yoga Sutras, because yours is much more in depth and you give language to it. But I think as a start, I hope that people find benefit, and I hope this shows up the right way, because Facebook does turn things around.
Oh, no. I can see it. I think it's showing up. Yep, that's all good.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So in yogic terms, our basic nature is svarupe, and I think it's quite beautiful to use the terminology. Sometimes it's described, so Iyengar describes it as radiance, and I really like that terminology.
I like the term radiance. Radiance resonates for me.
Yeah. And then the sutras say that everything else falls into the category of our mental fluctuations, and that it's the identification with these fluctuations that is the cause of suffering. And it's simple, and just I can't hear it enough. And I know you've broken down these mental fluctuations into much more nuance. The sutras do go into just 5 different varieties of fluctuations, but I am itching to see what you've got, Dr. Rachel, please.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of congruence between the model you've just shared from yoga and this one, which sort of comes from depth psychology, I think. So here are the 3 circles drawn very wonkily by me. And in the inner circle, in the middle circle, we have our radiance, we have our vitality, we have our essential. There's so many ways. It's before words and beyond words, but here's some words, and I think this is where our universal human needs live as humans. When we talk about the core human needs, we always remind people that it doesn't matter where you're from. It could be from Africa, Brisbane, or somewhere else, and we all want love, we all want connection, we come into the world with those needs, like I mentioned before. And this is the birthplace of our vitality, our radiance, our drive, and hence we call it the essential self. Now, when our needs are not met, and so in psychological terms, when our needs seem to be frustrated, violated, or unsupported, there is usually a kind of shock. So I told the story a few Sundays ago of being a 4-year-old, experimenting with the blocks at preschool, and I was just being a little innocent kid, and the next moment I got a big smack on the backside, and that was the shock. So I was in my essential self, experimenting with curiosity, and then shock, and then pain, and then all these other vulnerable feelings. I don't know if you can see what I've written here, but hurt, sadness, fear, shame, and basically that's our vulnerability. When we feel excessively vulnerable and we feel some sort of emotional pain, that's coming out of our unmet needs, is one way to say it. The thing, though, is once we've been shocked into this second circle, it's very hard to stay with pain. All of us know how much we can easily pull away from pain, because, that's sort of how we're hardwired. It's survival to pull away from pain. And we do this behaviorally and psychologically. So if we can't sit with our feelings, because it's so painful, maybe we don't have anyone there to hold space for us, we tend to go into our protective structures, into our defenses. So this outer circle contains things like behavioral and psychological adaptations to pain, like avoidance, dissociation, fleeing, running away.
I wonder, Rachel, would you mind, just before you go into that third circle, which I'm dying to hear more about, but just for the sake of comprehension, because it is so central to the work that we do, I'm keen to hear more about the relationship between the shock and the vitality. Just before we go on to the next circle, would you mind just talking a little bit more about that,
Sure.
the second circle first?
Absolutely. Also, I want to ask, is it legible? Because in my window, it's back to front. Oh, no, it's okay. You can read that, can't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so in nonviolent communication, we talk about the pain of unmet needs. So all of us have inside of us a need for love, belonging, self-worth, acceptance, choice, freedom, self-expression. We can pull out the needs list and see just how many words we have for our needs. And when those needs are met, we stay in our core essence. There's a sense of vitality. Just think of anything you're doing that's meeting your need for connection or discovery, how good that feels. And we get to stay in our essential nature when we're having an experience of having our needs supported. It's when our needs aren't supported and we get out of alignment with our core values that we can start to feel, eventually in time, anxious, depressed, and slipping into avoidant behaviors, addictive behaviors. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the shock is usually there seems to be, I can't represent it well in the circle, but there seems to be an order. The first experience we usually have is shock. One moment I'm going about my business. The next moment I receive criticism, or the next moment something happens that feels like it's registered as a shock, however small. Maybe I get negative feedback at work. Maybe, someone doesn't reply to my text message and at some point it hits me and it feels like shock. Oh, and confusion. I could add confusion to this second circle. And then we go into our head sometimes and we start to judge or blame or feel angry or aggressive. So, and we're just doing these things in the outer circle to defend or to protect ourselves.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is emotion is in the second circle and then behavior is in the third circle, and that these are really outer representations, they're surface fluctuations that are distinct to our natural state, which is really steady and calm and stable when, as you say, our needs are met.
Yeah, or vital. Sometimes we might feel really excited and joyful in our natural state, but there's no obstruction to the life flow. And I think what happens is when this second circle is when there is obstruction to the life flow. And you're right, it's emotional pain. I've written pain here, but really I mean emotions and emotional pain. And if we don't have, growing up especially, if we don't have a wise, caring or healthy adult there to help us make sense of our pain and then make sense of our needs, we will end up in all manner of defense mechanisms to protect ourselves. Of course, nothing that's trying to protect us can be bad, but we all know what it's like to feel numb, to comfort eat, to maybe want to drink or get angry and obnoxious. We've all had some experience of being defensive, going into self-protection, but we also know the pain of living in this third circle, the pain of only identifying with who we think we are. So we've also got identity here. I'm very careful not to identify too much. Sometimes I notice I do as a psychologist, because I'm a human first and foremost. I'm in this circle here. That's where I enjoy being, right? All of us enjoy that vitality. And so one more thing I'll say about this model before we maybe open up for questions. The whole point of this model of the self is actually like to return to our essential nature. And I believe one powerful way is through empathy. And so I usually finish drawing this on my little whiteboard in my office by writing the words empathy or self-empathy and doing an arrow, because it's the empathy that I receive from myself or another that helps me soften my defense mechanisms, sit with my pain, and return to something that's more core, more truthful, more essential inside myself. And hence why you and I emphasize self-compassion practices in all of our work.
Yeah, my mind is seeking the integration, particularly around the how and this empathy as the means to bring us back, particularly relative to the sutras, which say, you know, that it's about de-identifying or unhooking from these outer layers that allows us to come back. So yeah, what's coming to mind is Kristen Neff's definition of compassion, and she includes the recognition that all humans feel the same way.
Yes, that's right. The shared humanity.
Yeah. Yes. So it's not personal, and if it's not personal, I can unhook from it. It's not to do with me or my. It's not an I. It's a universal experience. That's my understanding of how empathy helps us to unhook. Okay, so yeah, if I can see that we all experience the same thing, then I can detach from it to a certain extent.
Exactly. So it's the mindfulness. That's right. The mindfulness is required in order to detach from it to a certain extent. And the empathy slows us down. Compassion practices slow us down, as do contemplative and yoga practices. And compassion has a slower pace. You know, a lot of the things in this outer circle, aggression and anger and avoidance and judgment and blame, these are quite fast-paced things, you know, internally, you know, when I'm judging myself, judging the other, running away from my own pain, you know, that's very understandable, but it's not the answer, because it's a self-perpetuating cycle, that self-defense. You know, our Jungian friends talk about defending against emotion. They use that phrase quite often. And every time I hear them talking about defenses against affect or emotion, I think, oh my gosh, this is so everyday for human beings. We don't want to feel our feelings, and we don't even consciously avoid and shut down our feelings. It's a fairly unconscious physiological thing, particularly things like dissociation. This is physiological, you know, we've trained our system through life to shut down our feelings and we defend ourselves against painful feelings, because let's be honest, shame doesn't feel great. Fear, hurt, sadness, these are hard emotions to sit with. But if we have a person, if we learn for ourselves to do this, or we have a person who can sit with us with empathy and non-judgment, then we can make this journey through the defenses, through the fluctuations, through the pain, back to our core self.
As I'm looking at the images, I'm reminded of the human body and the breath at the center. I often talk about how the breath, even the volume of air, as I breathe in, brings awareness, sensory awareness to my center, and as I breathe out, you know, I'm invited into the center, into my basic nature. And that, you know, these fluctuations, again, it's perhaps the body is somewhere around here, or perhaps in the shock space where we can experience emotion in the body, again, in this universal way, so that we're no longer identified with it. And that can then help us to come back to this basic nature. And then thoughts, I would say, sit even further out, and behaviors as you've drawn.
Yeah, they're over here, the blame and the judgment and the criticism, and
I'm keen to hear from our listeners. I think we should take a vote. You could like sell your model and I could sell my model and we could take a vote.
Stephanie says, I'm so in the third circle right now.
Oh, Stephanie. Oh, darling. Yes. Well, if it's, yeah, you're in the right place, Stephanie. And if it's the Stephanie who I hope it is, then I know that you'll be coming on retreat. And so you'll get a good dose of empathy, self-empathy. You'll get a good dose of sitting in your basic nature experientially. So hopefully even knowing the theory will help, which it does, even just to recognize, okay, that's my thinking, that's my feeling, that's my behavior. It's not who I fundamentally am.
That's it. And that's what this does. Like the last time I introduced this to a client, he was really struggling with anger and rage. And we went through this for him, and he could see that under his anger and rage, which was a protection mechanism, and it was the little boy in him who wanted protection, which is such a softening image or thought in itself. He could see that under the anger there was pain, under the anger there was real vulnerability, and there was hurt, and there was fear, and there was shame. And we were able to sit in an empathic space together and take this journey to identify what he was really longing for, what he was really yearning for. And he did leave the session feeling more vitalized. He came in looking so depressed. His anger was really getting him down and deflating him, understandably. And so just to see him walk out of my room, just after having really connected with this model and feeling kinder towards himself and a bit more alive, was so beautiful. And he went home and he drew this for his partner on their whiteboard. Home, he told me.
Oh, that's good news. Yeah, well, this should get out there. We'll definitely be using it a lot during the retreat. That's the image that we'll be coming back to again and again. So it sinks in.
And it does seem to be an overarching model that relates to all of the practices that we will be sharing.
Yes. Now there's a couple more comments. So Libby's asking, is defense the same as protection?
I'm using them interchangeably in this model, Libby. I mean, to me, they mean the same thing. You know, there's ways in which it's such a strong impulse, isn't it, to protect ourselves and to defend ourselves. I guess I think of the image of the sword and the shield, and the shield is to protect ourselves and the sword is to defend ourselves. And it's an archetypal image through much mythology in many cultures. And in psychology, the sword and the shield, when I'm with couples, I sort of say, let's put down the swords and let's put down the shields and the swords. There's, you know, there's no need to be defended in this space because everything is allowed. And that is the spirit of compassion as well. Whatever arises in you is allowed. All feelings are valid and allowed. Not all perceptions are valid. Of course not. If I feel shame and I think that, you know, I'm stupid, I'm never going to validate that perception in my clients. But I'm going to validate the fear and shame that might sit underneath that perception. And putting down the shield and the sword, the defense and the protection, is absolutely necessary if we are to really connect with ourselves again.
Libby says that makes sense, and thank you. It's so what I'm hearing, Rachel, and again, I love it when you correct me, but what I'm hearing from today's discussion is even defenses or protection could be likened to the experience of stress, and that if we find ourselves in that situation, that if we can slow down, as you say, put down the weapons and take a moment to honour ourselves, our feelings and our needs, that we'll find something valuable about ourselves and, ways to work with ourselves rather than perpetuating a cycle of escape or avoidance.
Yeah.
Does that fit with what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that question, because in my own little brain right now, I am trying to integrate a few bodies of work, including my burnout stuff. And even as I think about this model and I think about the diminished personal accomplishment, the exhaustion and the depersonalization aspects of burnout, I think, yeah, these are the body and the mind trying to protect us from further stress, trying to wake us up to our needs. And I would say both of these layers are stressful, but there's a clean stress, an unpolluted stress in sitting with our primary feelings. But much of our stress is probably out here in this layer of defense and protection, as we do all the things that we tend to do when we're, in distress. So anyway, I'm going to think more on that, where my stress and burnout stuff sort of fits and integrates with this model. Thank you for mentioning that.
Well, that was a stimulating discussion. I mean, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. We will get an opportunity to discuss this a lot more over on the island. Exciting that we're only a month away, and we've capped our numbers. So it's looking like a very, very precious group. We're really looking forward to sharing the time with you guys. So that's all from me for now. How about you, Rachel? Anything to share?
That's all from me for now as well, but I'll be happy to pop back onto the Facebook video later and answer any questions that people have. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for joining, everybody, and we'll see.
And do we want to mention our practice group that's coming up?
Yes, good idea.
Yeah.
It's on the 30th, so it lands on Halloween, our next practice group. So we're inviting, as per last year, some costumes. So bring a mask or a cape or a fairy wand or whatever you would like. And yeah, we'll meet here at the Graceful Bowls Club at 9:30 to 11:30. It's a Sunday morning. It's by a $5 donation just to cover costs. And we get a lovely 2 hours to bask in non-violent communication. And indeed, Rachel will be there.
I will. I'll be there this time. Yay.
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to having you along. So yes, please do come and get your fix, because we're heading into silly season, and goodness knows we can all skill up as best we can before we head down bum up for Christmas.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see some people at practice group next Sunday. And thank you so much, Alexis.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.